Houston, June, 1965, a heat wave, the air, thick with humidity, but something else hung in the air, fear. The house stood silent. It was the kind of silence that seemed to echo through the empty rooms, bouncing off the walls and filling the air with an almost tangible weight. The front door, slightly ajar, creaked softly as the wind whispered through the gap, carrying with it the faint scent of decay and neglect. This house, once filled with laughter and life, now stood as a monument to forgotten memories and untold stories. A silence that stung the nose. Dust particles floated lazily in the beams of sunlight that managed to pierce through the grime-covered windows, creating an almost ethereal glow in the otherwise dark and foreboding hallway. Each step taken inside this house seemed to disturb the very air, sending shivers down the spine of anyone brave enough to enter. The rooms, once filled with the warmth of human presence, now felt cold and unwelcoming, as if the house itself resented the intrusion. Officers responded to a call, a welfare check. They had no idea. The call had come in late at night, a concerned neighbor reporting that they hadn't seen the elderly resident in days. The officers, seasoned and experienced, approached the house with a mix of caution and routine. The flashing lights of their patrol car cast eerie shadows on the walls, adding to the already unsettling atmosphere. As they knocked on the door, the sound echoed through the empty house, a stark contrast to the silence that had enveloped the place for so long. They called out, their voices firm yet tinged with a hint of unease, but there was no response. With a shared glance, they pushed the door open and stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. What they found inside would haunt them for years to come. The house, with its silent rooms and dust-covered furniture, held secrets that were waiting to be uncovered. Each step they took seemed to reveal a new layer of the house's tragic history, from the faded photographs on the walls to the forgotten trinkets scattered on the floor. The officers moved methodically, their training guiding them through the eerie silence, but nothing could have prepared them for what they would find in the back room. The air grew colder as they approached, and the sense of foreboding grew stronger. The door to the back room was closed, and as they reached for the handle, a chill ran down their spines. They pushed the door open, and the sight that greeted them was one of pure horror. The room, once a cozy living space, was now a scene of unimaginable tragedy. The elderly resident lay motionless on the floor, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had been slowly fading away. The officers radioed for backup, their voices steady but their hearts heavy with the weight of what they had discovered. The house, with its whispers in the wind, had finally revealed its darkest secret. The horror that awaited inside the refrigerator was beyond comprehension. The officers, seasoned veterans of the force, had seen their fair share of gruesome scenes, but nothing could have prepared them for this. As the refrigerator door creaked open, the cold air mixed with the stench of decay, hitting them like a physical force. Inside, body parts were meticulously wrapped in butcher paper, each piece carefully labeled as if part of some grotesque inventory. The sight was enough to make even the most hardened detective's stomach churn. The detectives exchanged looks of shock and disbelief, their faces pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. They had walked into what could only be described as a nightmare. The body parts, once belonging to a living, breathing person, were now reduced to mere objects, stripped of their humanity. Each piece told a story of violence and cruelty, a testament to the unspeakable acts that had taken place. The close-up of the body parts in the refrigerator revealed the meticulous nature of the crime, the precision with which the killer had dismembered the victim. It was a level of depravity that was hard to fathom. This was no ordinary crime scene, this was personal. The scattered personal items, the intimate nature of the violence, all pointed to a deep, twisted connection between the victim and the perpetrator. The investigators worked methodically, collecting evidence, trying to piece together the events that had led to this horrific discovery. The police tape fluttered in the breeze, a stark reminder of the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Every item, every piece of evidence was a clue, a piece of the puzzle that would hopefully lead them to the monster responsible for this atrocity. The weight of the task ahead was heavy, but the detectives knew they had to press on, for the victim, for justice, and to ensure that such horrors would not go unseen again. Montrose, a neighborhood known for its charm, its quiet streets, and friendly faces. The Rogers family fit right in. Section 2. The Rogers family, Fred and Edwina, a couple in their twilight years, enjoyed the simple pleasures of life. Section 3. A son's shadow. Their son, Charles, a brilliant but eccentric man, lived with them but kept to himself. Section 4. Growing concern. Days turned into weeks. Relatives grew worried. No one had seen or heard from the Rogers. A house of horrors. The door creaked open. A silence, deafening, hung in the air. The officers approached the refrigerator, their hearts pounding. Inside, a macabre collection. Fred and Edwina Rogers, their bodies dismembered with a precision that challenged. Section 4. Whispers of madness. Their heads never found. Organs missing, flushed away. Madness. Section 1. The Elusive Son, Charles, a recluse, even before. Charles Rogers, a name that would later become synonymous with mystery and intrigue, was always a man of few words. Born into a well-to-do family in Houston, Texas, Charles was an intelligent and curious child. However, as he grew older, he became increasingly withdrawn, choosing to spend most of his time alone. His reclusive nature was evident even before the events that would forever mark his name in history. Friends and family described him as a quiet, introverted individual who preferred the company of books and scientific experiments over social gatherings. Despite his brilliance, Charles never seemed to fit in with the world around him. The horror unfolded. He lived. The horror that would later unfold in the Rogers household was unimaginable. Charles lived in a modest home in a quiet suburban street in Houston. The house, now infamous, stood as a silent witness to the dark events that transpired within its walls. Neighbors often remarked on the eerie silence that seemed to envelop the house, a stark contrast to the lively homes around it. The dimly lit hallways and the shadows that danced on the walls added to the unsettling atmosphere. It was as if the house itself was hiding secrets, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. In a world of his own. Charles Rogers lived in a world of his own making. His home, filled with clutter and remnants of his scientific pursuits, was a reflection of his chaotic mind. He spent hours, sometimes days, locked away in his room, poring over books and conducting experiments. The blinds were always drawn, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror his inner turmoil. To the outside world he was an enigma, a man lost in his thoughts, disconnected from reality. But within the confines of his home, Charles was in his element, a solitary figure navigating the labyrinth of his mind. Section 2. A mind of shadows. Brilliant, they said. A mind made for greater things, but his behavior unsettling. Section 3. Whispers of espionage. Whispers started about Charles, his work in nuclear physics, too close to comfort. Section 4. The prime suspect, and then he vanished. Gone without a trace. Charles Rogers, prime suspect. Section 1. A Web of Intrigue. The Icebox murders became a magnet for theories, each more outlandish than the last. Section 2. The Kennedy connection. Some whispered of a connection to the Kennedy assassination. Charles, they said, knew too much. Section 3. Shadowy Figures. Others claimed Charles was involved in espionage. A double life. A dangerous. Section 4. Unanswered questions. Decades have passed. The questions remain. Who killed Fred and Edwina, and why? The Icebox murders remain one of Houston's most chilling unsolved crimes. A gruesome reminder that, even in a city that never sleeps, Charles Rogers, the brilliant but eccentric son, vanished into thin air. Did he commit the crime, or was he a pawn in a deadlier game? The end.